Hey, what's up, guys? It's Bakes here, and thank you for joining me again for this episode of my random horror reviews. It wasn't too long ago I did a review for the remake to The Hills Have Eyes, roughly maybe a month or two ago, ballpark range. And that's probably the installment in the Hills Have Eyes franchise that I revisit the most often. And when I say the franchise, I'm including the two original films. And it's probably my favourite as well, very closely followed by the OG. But while I was watching the remake, I was like, okay, I actually kind of want to watch part two because it's actually been a little while. So today's movie is 2007's The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, obviously sequel to the remake. It's probably the installment in the franchise that I haven't seen in the longest time, so it was a little bit vague in my mind. There were some things that I did remember, but as I said, I just kind of wanted to check it out again. So, getting into the plot for this movie, obviously takes place in the same location as the first movie, off in like this barren desert. I forget specifically where in America it takes place, but I guess it's not too important. It's got like this barren desert landscape sort of thing, these big fucking rocky hills and everything. And it's a ex-military nuclear testing site. The opening to this movie, we have all these scientists who are accompanied by soldiers doing these tests there, and they're all picked off by the mutated inbred cannibals living off in the hills. Moving on, a group of trainee soldiers. I forget why they have to go over there. I think it's a quick in and out, maybe just dropping off supplies or whatever. But a group of like trainee soldiers and their commander or whatever have to go in and do this quick in and out. But they realize that everyone there is gone or dead, and it sort of turns into a search and rescue. However, they end up facing off against, again, the people living off in the mountains and in the hills, and yeah, it's a fight for survival. So that's pretty much the plot for this one, so let's get into my thoughts of 2007's The Hills Have Eyes 2. Like I said in my introduction, it had been a little while since I checked out The Hills Have Eyes 2, like just off the top of my head I'm going to say maybe like 5 or 6 years. But I do remember this one actually being alright, like fairly decent. I remember it was nothing incredible or anything, but still definitely worth a watch. But rewatching it for this review, like I was genuinely surprised by how much I enjoyed watching it, and it was actually a lot better than I remembered it being. With that being said, I'm not exactly sure how I remembered it being, if that makes any sense, in terms of like, I'm not sure if I kind of remembered it being a bit more goofy or a little bit more lower budgeted or over the top or whatever. Just in general, I feel like I remembered it being a bigger step down from the quality of the first movie. Like I said, I really enjoy the first movie, and it still probably isn't as good as the first one, but entertainment-wise, it's definitely up there. But like I said, it was surprisingly solid upon this rewatch, and in a way, probably just underestimated on my behalf. Getting into it, just as brutal as the first movie in terms of like the gore, the violence, gross shit going down. The film literally opens with a mutated bastard baby being born, which caught me off guard because, like I said, I haven't seen this movie in a long time. It's literally the opening scene. I do not remember that happening at all. I was like, oh fuck, there's lots of blood, and it gets right into it. But then other stuff as well, like people getting infected by shit, and I mean literal poo, like shit. Gnarly, gross rape scenes. Just a lot of graphic, brutal stuff, gore in general. It did kind of have a feel to me like it was intentionally being more gross out and pushing those kind of things compared to the first movie, where in the first movie it just felt a bit more organic, like it was just being in the situation. This one did seem to push the gore and the violence just that little bit more, in my opinion, to a point where it felt a little bit more over the top, but still overall solid on that note. Moving on and getting into the story, because that was another thing that was a lot better than I remembered it being. I was just way more engaged than what I kind of expected to be. I never felt bored. I felt invested in the team's escape. There were moments where I was pretty locked into the suspense of the whole situation and everything going on. Now, with that being said, it's not like every character I cared about them. A lot of them, though I was invested in the team's overall escape, I didn't really care if they died or not. But that in of itself was a nice change of pace to what I was expecting. Again, just off what I vaguely remembered from the first time watching this movie, a while back. I kind of expected going into this one to be like rooting for the bad guys, almost like a high kill count, lots of blood gore, yeah, just chop off heads, have fun with it. But like I said, I was actually very invested in this team, escaping and getting out of this situation, and them having the one up on the people off in the hills. I spoke recently, a couple of episodes about this, when I did a review for Wrong Turn 4. In that movie, you don't care if the protagonists die because it's just that type of slasher movie where you're just having fun and you want to see a high kill count. Again, that's kind of what I expected with this one, but like I said, I was like pleasantly surprised with how much I cared about these people getting out of this situation. Not to the point where I was, again, cut that, some of them died or whatever, but it was a lot more invested than what I expected to be. Though this movie felt more brutal and serious to what I remembered it being, it kind of also had a bit more of a over the top feel and felt a little less grounded in some sort of aspects as well. Which, when you go through everything going on in this movie, it's kind of hard to justify because it's still pretty full on and gnarly. But it just kind of does have that feel, at least to me. Like I said before, the gore, I guess, is a little bit more over the top. The characters' personalities are a bit more out there and a bit more varied. Even the mutant inbred people living off in the hills seem to be given a bit more characteristics and identity about them as well. Like, you have one that's like half made of rock, so he blends into things. You have like the Big Papa, who's like the head of the clan. You even got this nice one that kind of reminded me of Sloth from the Goonies, and he kind of came out of nowhere, like just no explanation. He was there. That was kind of random. But like, even in the first movie, I know the inbred mutated hill people in the first OG Hills Have Eyes had names and everything, and die-hard horror fans would know the names of them pretty well and everything. But the hill people in this one kind of reminded me of Gremlins 2. And I know that sounds really random and like totally polar opposites, but like, for example, in the first Gremlins movie, we know the head gremlin is named Stripe. Most people would know that, but then there's just the rest of the gremlins. In Gremlins 2, you've got like the vegetable gremlin, you've got the electric gremlin, you got the bat gremlin, you got the talk show gremlin. Like, there's so many different types of gremlins. That's what it sort of felt like with the mutated inbred hill people in this movie. So, like I've been saying, this movie was a pleasant surprise, but it still wasn't perfect or anything by any means. I'll start off with some nitpicky stuff at first that didn't bother me hugely, but I will bring it up. Some moments of not great CGI effects where I feel like practical definitely could have been used. Some real obvious green screen shots at some points in this movie. Some moments of the prosthetics on the mutants not being so great. Maybe it was depending on the lighting or whatever, but sometimes it just looked a little bit off or rubbery. But like I said, just way more pros than cons with this watch. And the main thing was that I was 100% entertained, and that's the main thing that you want from a movie. I was way more invested than what I thought I would be. Still not as good as the first movie, which, even though I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this movie, the first one to me, I just think is fucking fantastic. I love how grounded it feels and the brutality mixed in with that. And then there's just something that I like more about a family going up against the people in the hills rather than, yes, these guys are training to be in the army and they're not fully sure of how to deal with stuff yet, but just something about a family going up against them I like a little bit more as well. But giving this one a rating out of 10, I'm happy to give it a solid 7.5. Like, as I said, I was way more entertained and engaged than what I thought I'd be. And maybe I shouldn't put it off, a rewatch for so long this time around. But if you've seen The Hills Have Eyes too, let me know your thoughts on this movie. Like I said, I did remember it being like somewhat decent, but man, I was just locked in on this movie. I had such a fun time. I was definitely engaged, so happy I did decide to go around and give it a rewatch sooner rather than later. But let me know your thoughts of that movie in the comments below, guys, and I'll see you for another video soon. Peace.